Season 12 has been a big wake-up call for a lot of Overwatch players. With the new mobility meta, a lot of the things that worked in previous seasons are getting punished right now, and there's certain things that you need to know if you want to dominate Season 12. So we're going to break down 10 tips that you can use right now so you can start winning more games. But it says only 20% of you are subscribed, so do me a solid and press that subscribe button. We're really close to 90,000 subscribers, and I want to get there, but let's jump right in. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is that in this season, mobility is king. There's a lot of characters that are fragile, and especially when an immortal Winston jumps on top of them, combined with the Tracer, Sombra, or any other character, you're going to evaporate. And because of that, there are several things that you need to consider. If you're a character that doesn't have mobility, your positioning needs to be perfect. The best way to actually have great position is to make sure that you know where the enemy dive characters are at any moment, and you know when you are isolated. So if there's a Genji wrapping to the right side of you, or a Tracer on the left, or a Winston walking forward, understand that you do not have the means to run away from these characters. Oftentimes, you need them to exhaust any amount of their mobility to get to you, because then at the very least, if you can fight them off, they have to run away instead of being able to chase you down more. Now, in addition to that, you need to make sure that you are playing with your team. You have line of sight of your team. Like if you're an Ana, you need to make sure that you are in line of sight of people that can save you if you get dove. If you know that there are enemies wrapping to the left side of the map on you, you need to start wrapping to the right, keeping yourself at distance from a lot of these dive characters, making sure that you always know where they are, and trying to have active line of sight of your teammates so that they helping you is as easy as possible is the way that you're going to survive being immobile in a mobility world right now. The second thing that you need to take away from this season is that tanks are raid bosses. Now, this has been true for quite some time, but it's really important this season in particular that you respect tanks more than you ever have. There are a lot of tanks that you are just not going to be able to interact with positively. Take Winston, for example. Being able to kill a Winston on most characters in the game is going to be really impossible without a lot of focus fire. That being said, you can still make it so that a Winston cannot exist and do what he wants to do by doing a couple of important things. Number one, make it so that his bubbles do not get a crazy amount of value. Oftentimes, this means bailing out and helping your teammates or breaking that bubble when necessary. It also means you are respecting this Winston. Oftentimes, you are trying to keep yourself alive and back away from the Winston, kite away, or you're trying to find value in spite of the Winston. Oftentimes taking off angles, maybe doing counter dives yourself, but the important thing here is that Winston himself is very difficult to interact with, and he's also a character that demands your respect. But in the world of D.Va and Winston's, I would say there's extra pressure on each of the roles differently. For damage dealers, you need to make sure that you are not playing angles where you can get isolated and killed. And you also want to see if you can trigger that DPS passive on that Winston whenever he's in your team. Even if you can just trigger it lightly, that would be great. You don't have to hard focus fire him, but just a little bit of damage to trigger that passive is a really big deal because it forces him out that much faster. In addition to that, supports, you need to make sure that you're ready to help and peel your teammates. If your Cassidy is about to die and you don't interact and help him in time, your Cassidy does die. No one's there to protect you from a diver. I mean, the whole team is going to fall apart. So you need to be really disciplined with how fast you are to help your teammates and bail them out. And then as a tank player, you need to either understand whether or not you can stop an aggressive tank or whether you need to apply pressure to split that tank from their backline. Because like a Winston, a D.Va, or whatever tank is in your backline, that person still wants heals and resources to keep fighting back there. And if you create basically like a wall, or you split their backline providing heal resources to that tank, then you can force that tank back that much quicker. But I did reference peeling, and in general, in this season, peeling is so important. And all peeling is going back and helping your teammates. Oftentimes, when you look at your composition and you look at your opponent's composition, if they're playing dive characters, Sombra, Tracer, Winston, you need to look at your comp and say, who's the target? Who is my enemy going to come after? Who is going to get feasted on? If I have a Zen, it's going to be that. If I have an Ana, it could be that. If I have an Ashe, a Hanzo, it could be that. So knowing who is the target on your team is a really great thing because you put yourself in the mindset of the enemy and you position and do things in a way to help your teammates stay alive. Like if I'm Cassidy, right, and I have a Hanzo on my team and I know that he's going to get jumped, if I can prevent him from dying in the jump, Like, if I can do things to help him get a tank off of him, kill a DPS that's diving onto him, we can win the fight just because I am peeling and helping my teammate. But if I go off on an off angle, if I go off trying to be aggressive, trying to kill supports, I might think, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm getting an off angle. I'm going to go try to kill somebody. But my Hanzo just dies for free. No one stops him. No one punishes the people that kill him. And then eventually I'm next, right? So it's really important that you peel heavy in this meta. And even as a diver, oftentimes, if you're playing a dive character, but they maybe have a better comp than you, or they're more coordinated in their dives than you, oftentimes as a diver, you would rather mark the enemy diver. So, like as an example, let's say they're playing Sombra, Tracer, Winston, right? And they're jumping all together on one person on your team. That person's dying instantly. Doesn't really matter what you do. But if you go and before that Tracer can go in, you get on that Tracer, you start trading resources. Both of y'all use recall. Now, when they go in, their Tracer can't go with them. It's going to be their Sombra and their Winston only. And that is a lot easier to survive against than all three of them at the same time. The idea here is that you are not an all-in dive comp, so you want to disrupt their all-in dive. Now, the fourth tip I got for you in this season is you got to really watch the snowball. It's really easy in this season, especially on some of the new maps and new modes, to die again and again and again. You think you're safe, you walk out, you die again. I cannot stress how important it is to hard reset, especially when you're trying to come back to the fight, especially when you're trickling in. There's a lot of characters. Sombra's really strong right now. There's characters with a lot of mobility. You can get caught in places you didn't think you would get caught in. So I want you to really try and group up as much as possible. A lot of buddy system going on, a lot of two people moving around the map. Flashpoint is a really, really dangerous map to not have great mobility on because you can get caught out on. I do love that they added the speed boost to the little spawn door now. It's a little bit better. But in general, you got to make sure that you are living and not dying these free deaths to snowball. So I would rather you maybe waste a couple of seconds full regrouping and missing out on a couple of shots you would have taken rather than pushing up too far and then dying again and then having to snowball, or even worse, your team fights without you and they lose because you're not there. That's terrible. Now, number 5, I need you to change your playstyle up against certain heroes. So, if you've seen my tier list, I did talk about the idea of saving cooldowns depending on the matchup, or using them more aggressively depending on the matchup. So, let's say you're Ana, right? And you're playing against like a Widow, Hanzo, Poke composition. If you want, you can use your Sleep Dart really aggressively. You can use your Nade really aggressively. You can deal damage really aggressively. They're going to do damage in bursts. They're going to be poking. So, you can actually be really proactive with a lot of your abilities, and you're not going to get punished for it. You're not going to die for it, because if you're in the back line with no sleep, no nade, it doesn't matter. But up against a dive comp, up against a Winston, Sombra, Tracer, you need every ounce of your abilities to keep you alive. You need to be able to nade yourself and the Winston when they jump on you. You need to be able to sleep that Sombra that's sneaking up behind you. You need to conserve every cooldown you have. And it's really important that you do not default to the same use of your cooldowns depending on what you're up against. And you might say, hey, Mills, I'm saving my cooldowns. No one's coming after me. No one's punishing me for it. I'm going to start using my cooldowns. And this can be okay if you're going to use your cooldowns and win the fight right then and there. But I will say that if you're playing against a dive comp, against a character that is typically weak to dive, and they're not pressuring you or killing you, and you're saving your cooldowns, you're probably going to just win that game very easily. When I've coached a lot of players, they oftentimes will die and run into problems because they waste their cooldowns in situations that they didn't have to, and then they need them for future situations. Another thing that you should always be doing, and I kind of referenced it earlier in the video, is kind of moving away from the side that the divers are routing on, right? If the Sombra, Tracer are wrapping left, you want to wrap right. This is true for characters like Hanzo and Cassidy. The initial, desire, especially on DPS, like Cass and Hanzo, is to meet them. You're like, oh, they're going left. I'm going to meet them, and I'm going to double dink them, right? Or I'm going to single dink them on Hanzo, and it's going to be great, right? But the thing you want is actually time. These characters want to get on you. They want to get close to you. You want as many opportunities to hit a shot as possible, which means moving away, shooting away, because your effective range is further than them. I know the desire is to oh, this is anxiety. I'm going to meet it right now, and I'm going to deal with it right now, and then I can go do some other stuff. You got to put the burden on them more instead of making it so that the conclusion happens a lot faster and you make it a lot easier on them. I know it deals with like your problems right then and there, but it's actually better for you if you elongate the problem and you make that opponent do all the work, routing to you. You're getting all these potential shots the entire time. You hit one dink on Cass, recall. You hit one dink on Hanzo, they die. So that's what you want to do. You want to elongate that cycle, and you're actually going to win those fights more. And number 6, this is super important to dominate in Season 12, and it's tracking ultimates. There's a lot of ultimates that are needed to track, like a primal on Winston. If a Winston has jumped in 3 times and hasn't ulted, he's going to primal on the next jump. And this doesn't mean that you don't focus him. Oftentimes, it's good to bait primal, but if you all in hoping that you're going to be able to kill him and he primals, you can make the worst play possible that results in you overextending and dying. Ultimates like Death Blossom, with Reaper seeing a lot of play, are ultimates that are definitely capable of being shut down with Suzu, with certain cooldowns, with burst damage, with range, but you got to be ready for them. Things like EMP is also really important. You can position more wide. You can make it so that not everyone gets hit by the EMP. It's important to make sure that, especially when these characters have gone through multiple fights, multiple cycles, and they haven't used it, they almost definitely have it. So you need to make sure that you are active, you're vocal, if you can be, about which one of these ultimates are up. And the number one advice that I would give you is when someone has an ultimate, come up with a plan. A plan to be better suited against the ultimate. It doesn't have to be a great plan. We can evaluate that later. I just want you to come up with some plan. Whatever plan it is, as long as you have a plan to be a little bit better suited for the ultimate that you know they have, you will start to play better all around. And most of the time when ultimates get crazy value or pop off or whatever, it's because no one is even thinking about them at all. So that you're way ahead of the game there, and I think it's really important this season. The number 7 on the list is find your target. This is especially if you are playing a dive-esque composition or a mobility-heavy composition. I want you to find the vulnerable pick on the enemy team or the vulnerable player and abuse them as much as you can. Oftentimes, there's a lot of characters that just don't have great means to survive against coordinated dives or even duo dives. Like, let's take that Ana example. If she gets jumped up by a Winston and a bubble with a Tracer on her, there's not much she can do, and she can just instantly die. And I want you to find these gaps in player skill and gaps in player pick and just abuse the hell out of them. Like, your goal should be swap that character, get off that character. And if you get them to get off, then you don't have to focus them anymore. But this is kind of what you want to find. Like, it's kind of sink or swim. If they're good enough to shut you down as that Ana player, then they're not that vulnerable player anymore. But if they're playing a pick that you or your duo can surgically target, that is something that I want you to do over and over and over again. Some people are so stubborn that they will not adapt their play or their pick, and you'll win the entire game because of it. It's almost like there is a weakness in a comp, but oftentimes players don't poke around enough to find where the weakness is. And then some of these players that are not very adapting, they aren't very good, to lack of the better term, get away with it because they're not being tested. I want you to test these players and use that to win a lot of games. And number 8, I want you to create compositions off your tank. Now, if you're a one trick, this tip is not for you, I'm sorry. But if you're everyone else, what your tank picks should dictate what your comp is. I have a whole video talking about synergy on this channel when I talk about the worst duos. But basically what you want to do is if you have a hero pool, you want to line up your character with the tank that best fits the comp that synergizes, right? So like if someone locks a Sigma and you're a Genji and a Hanzo player, you should definitely be playing Hanzo. And the reason is because Hanzo synergizes with the Sigma tank, right? Sigma's a poke tank, Hanzo can poke. And Genji can dive, and dive is anti-synergistic with poke. So the idea here is that whatever your tank picks, because the tank is the singular most powerful thing that dictates the strategy on the battlefield on your team, you want to pick whatever's in your hero pool synergizes the best with that tank when you can, especially going in the dark, right? Oftentimes, especially when you're not thinking about what the enemy picks, you don't know what they're picking, you don't know what tank they are, you don't know what characters they are, it's better for you to try to come out with the most synergistic composition possible, and that might not always be possible for you. You might not play characters that perfectly match, but I would say try to line that up if all possible, because you see this so often where teams just completely just don't work, right? You've gotten into games where you have a team and nothing works out. Y'all lose, nothing works out at all. And that could be a communication problem, but oftentimes it's a synergy problem, because it's not like the people on that team have never won a game, right? You'll all win games by yourself, but in that environment, there's something that is creating an anti-synergy that doesn't allow y'all to play, you know, on the same page. And that happens a lot when you play characters that just don't even do remotely similar things. You know, Genji's not poking, Sigma's not diving, neither of y'all are helping each other, and all y'all's efforts are kind of working at tandems against each other. Now, the 9th tip I'll give you for this season is make sure to often check your team's fighting force. Just because your team is all alive doesn't mean your team is ready to fight. Your team could have really, really low HP, or y'all could have no cooldowns. And it's really important that sometimes you need to take a little wellness check. And I think that's more important now than a lot of seasons, because it's really easy for the momentum to shift out of nowhere. You could be winning a fight by all your players, and then, you know, you push into aggressively, 2 of your players get picked off, 3 of your players get picked off, then they ult, and it's just over, right? So take a second sometimes. Sometimes you have a core advantage. Take a second. Do a wellness check. Get everyone healed up. Get everyone cooldowns up. Then be aggressive again. Push up. Sometimes you need to slow things down. Now, I'm not saying to completely lay off the gas here. You don't want to give up all your tempo, but at the same time, don't just keep W and W and W like a goddamn hound dog, because it's super easy for a fight to be swapped. Understand that ultimates could come out on the enemy team, and if you don't have abilities and you're not ready for it, and you know, you're kind of on loose footing, right? Like, the further and more aggressive you push, you're like kind of balancing on one foot, right? And you could get knocked over and the whole thing could come falling down. So you need to make sure that you can build that steady frame up, and then you can push again from there, and try to do this a little more often than you are right now. Now, the last, number 10, and this one might be the most important tip in the entire video, and it's to not worry about your rank. There's a lot of resets going on. There's a lot of people moving up and down ranks, and I want you to kind of ignore all of that. You are still just as good of a player as you were in the previous season, and I want you to try to not care about rank as much as you have before. I want you to focus most on becoming a better player, making better decisions. Not just the wins and losses, because remember, at the end of the day, no one really cares about your rank besides you. I care about it too, and I want you to get higher rank, but more important than that, I want you to become better than you were yesterday. I want you to be your best self in-game, out-of-game, anytime, and it's really important that you focus on becoming better by eradicating your mistakes, not chasing after some rank, or getting too, you know, anxious about how good you are, what your rank is, or any of that stuff. All that is going to just hold you back and mentally strain you for no reason. Anyways, I hope this was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and smash that subscribe button if you enjoy the content. Thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.